Hello channel viewers, it's about 3 weeks into January 2017 and the new Kaby Lake processors from Intel have been released along with the Z270 chipsets on the new motherboards. So I've got a build for you today. This is a build that I've planned since the first of the year, gathering parts. All the parts have come in, and why don't we go through them now? Starting with the case, I've got a Thermaltake Suppressor F51 manufactured for all types of cooling and silent operation. That's why I chose this case in particular. I also needed a lot of room for hard drives, as this is going to be a data server and a few other things of that nature. To go in the case, the motherboard, we've got a Asus Maximus 9 Hero. It's an ROG series board. Love Asus boards. Been using them for years. Never had any trouble with them, so I just stick with what works. The processor that I chose for this build is the i7 7700k. This is an unlocked Kaby Lake chip that Intel has released, and as you can see, it doesn't come with a fan. So we're going to provide our own cooling solution. And the cooling solution that I've chosen is the Corsair H80i version 2. I had experience with the previous version. I think they called it the H80i GTX or GX or something along those. I think it was GTX. And very pleased with its performance. At idle, I'm getting 30 degrees Celsius, and at full bore, I can keep it right around 70 degrees Celsius, which I'm very happy with. The power supply that we're going to go with is the Corsair RM750i. I love this this power supply. I have the 650 watt version, and with a USB 2.0 header, you can do a lot of reporting in their Link software, so on and so forth. The cooling solution, the H80i, also does reporting on a 2.0 USB 2.0 header. We only have one 2.0 header on this motherboard, so we're going to use it to control and report on the cooling solution. The RAM that I chose is Corsair Vengeance. This is 4x8 for a total of 32 gig. Pretty standard. Again, love Corsair RAM. I know it looks like I'm a Corsair representative, but I just go with what works. They've got great customer service. They have a good manufacturing process. So I'm happy with, I've used Corsair RAM for 10 years. So that's what I chose for this. The boot drive, however, is something new. This is the M.2 drive from Samsung. The NVMe 960 Evo M.2 drive. Oddly enough, this board comes with two M.2 slots, so you could run two of these in RAID and get even a faster access, application access and boot up time. We're just going to do the one drive on this build. Got a standard DVD-ROM player, writer, and that rounds out the hardware for this build. So let's go ahead and get started and get the motherboard prepped. Okay, so we got the motherboard taken out of the box, and I'm going to do the build right on top of the box, and that's what it looks like right there. I'll get a closer shot of this, but the first thing that we're going to put in is the i7 7700k, and I'll get set up for a close-up shot of that. Okay, so let's take the CPU out of the box. Every Intel box usually has a thumb hole to indicate which direction you pull out. Okay, here's the instruction booklet, which we don't need. And here is the processor. So we're just going to pop out these little tabs right here and expose the core. Now there's a little, I opened up this little bracket and I'm going to expose the 1151 socket. Got the CPU out of its packaging. I'm going to open the little plastic cover here. And the way that you can tell the direction of the CPU is two different ways. One is a little gold triangle here in the corner. The other are these two little notches on either side opposite of that gold triangle, and they correspond to notches there on the socket. I've also noticed that every CPU that I've ever installed, the lettering on the CPU is the same direction as the lettering on the motherboard. So if you're looking from this direction, you can read both very easily. Intel provides two little holes to grab the CPU so that you don't touch the underside, which would be very bad. And then you just very carefully lay that into the socket. Very carefully lay that into the socket. And I usually give it a little wiggle to make sure it's in there. And then lay down the cover. And then you're going to pull this down where this part goes underneath that part to lock in the cover. Then this little plastic piece is going to pop off. And it's going to provide quite a bit of resistance, but it's okay. It's designed to do it that way. And there we have that popped right off. And now the CPU is installed. The next thing that we're going to install is the RAM. And the RAM comes in a package of 2. And these are designed at the factory to work together. So you want to install the RAM evenly on the gray slots and the black slots corresponding to each package. So we're going to open this up. So we're going to line up this notch right here with the notch right here on the motherboard. So you can see that's in the wrong direction. So we're going to turn it over and we're going to lay it carefully into the slot till it goes all the way in evenly. And then we're going to put both thumbs on either side and we're going to lock in one side and then we're going to lock in the other. And there it's in there tight. So we're going to install the second set of RAM that came in the same package into the other gray slot. And now the additional stick from the other package that'll go into the black slots. And the final stick of RAM into the other black slot. And there we go. All the RAM has been installed. Okay, we're going to go ahead and install the M.2 drive, the boot drive for this particular build. And this is the Samsung Evo 960. And we're going to put it in this slot right here. Okay. Asus provides a little standoff to be installed in the screw hole so that the drive will not be installed at an angle. We're going to stick it in the 2280 slot. Finger tight. We definitely don't want to harm that in any way. Okay. And when we insert this drive, we want to insert it at a little bit of an angle. And then it should spring just like that after you install it. And then we're going to put the screw in the standoff, which is a tiny little screw. And again, we're going to do that finger tight. Just like that. So now the boot drive is installed on the motherboard. And that will complete the preparation for the motherboard so that we can get it inside the case. Okay, so the first thing we need to do to prep the case for the motherboard is to install the I/O shield. And it's pretty simple installing these things. You install them from the inside and push it out. And the way the direction goes is the holes for the audio will always be on the bottom. Every case that I've ever installed in, that was the case, and this one's no different. So we're going to go ahead and lay that I/O shield in there. And we're going to pop it into place. And there we go. The I/O shield is installed. And Asus provides these foam-filled I/O shields that rest up against the motherboard, which is a really nice feature that I like. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and place the motherboard into the case, and the way that we're going to do this is we're going to come in at an angle and get the I/O ports lined up with the I/O shield, and then lay it down on its 9 standoffs. There's 3 up top, 3 in the middle, and 3 on bottom. And once we get it placed in there, then we'll put in a single screw to hold the motherboard in place while we get the other screws in. Okay, so we got the 1 screw put in the corner. Now I'm going to put the rest of the screws in finger tight, and it always helps to have a magnetic screwdriver. And I always use this lightweight one so that I don't over tighten. Just want to get them in there, but also don't want to lose any screws down in the motherboard. So this works good for me. Okay, now that we've got the motherboard in the case, you can see it right there. We want to install the DVD writer, and we do that by opening up the front panel. And we're going to install it right here. So we need to push out this particular pop out, which is very easy. And this case comes with locking clips for the DVD drive. So we're just going to simply push it in through the front on its rails. Until it snaps into place. Now what I like to do is I like to put screws in to hold it, because sometimes I ship my computers. So I'll go ahead and screw the holes in now. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is unpack our power supply and install the power supply. Corsair always puts them in these nice felt bags. I don't see the value in that too much, but it's a nice little touch, I suppose. Get all the stickers off. Okay, so can't tell you how many times I've seen power supplies installed improperly. This power supply with the fan on it is designed to draw air in from the bottom of the computer. So when you install this, it needs to be installed like that. And typically with Corsair power supplies, you can read the lettering properly if it's installed correctly. And of course the power supply goes right in there. And we'll go ahead and screw that in. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is we want to install the data storage drive. We got a 4 terabyte Western Digital drive, and you can put it anywhere in one of these 6 sleds, and you just simply remove the sled, and they have these little clips on the side. You pop the clip out like so, and then you place the hard drive in the sled and replace the clip back, and that holds the drive in. And that eliminates the need for screwing a screw into the side. And then you open up the clasp, slide the drive back in, close it, and you're done. So now we've populated one of the 6 drive bays. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to install is the CPU cooler, and that's going to be our Corsair H80i, and it's going to be installed similar to that. I've already removed the case fan that came with the F51, and now I'm going to mount the back plate that goes on the other side of the motherboard there, and then mount the fans that came with this on the radiator, on either side of the radiator. And then I'm going to mount the radiator here, and then the water block onto the CPU. And you'll notice that the H80i comes with thermal paste already on the water block, so we don't have to mess with thermal paste. And these are the connectors for the fans and the pump. And we'll get this started. So let's go ahead and get the bracket mounted on the back side of the motherboard. And the instructions say for the 1151 socket, you're going to have these sliding screw hole things pushed to the inside of the bracket. So we're going to go ahead and lay that down. I remember the days of building computers where we didn't have these openings on the back of the cases. So when we mounted plates for our really heavy air coolers, we had to mount them before we put the motherboard in the case. And this just makes it so much more convenient. Young people today don't realize the hassles that we had to go through back in the old days getting this back plate on. And now there's an opening on the case, which is extremely convenient. So there we go, we've got the back plate on the back of the motherboard. And let's turn this around. Okay, and now we're going to put the mounting screws through the motherboard. You can see where the back plate that we just installed is coming through the motherboard right there. There, and there. And now we're going to mount these screws into each one of those holes. We're going to do this finger tight. We don't want to, even though I install the radiator first, I like to put these screws on to hold that back plate from falling off. So now I don't have to keep coming back here and putting that back plate back on. Okay, so let's start installing the fans on the radiator. Okay, so the way computer fans work is that you've got 2 labels. You've got a label here that spins with the fan, and you can see that it's spinning. And then you have this side where the bracket is, and when the fan is spinning, the label doesn't move. The very easiest way to tell which way your airflow direction is the label that doesn't move is where your air is leaving. You can also tell sometimes, although this one doesn't seem to have it, but some fans, yeah, there it is right there. I don't know if you can see this on camera, but right there in the corner, there's an arrow that indicates the airflow is going this way, which would be towards the sticker that doesn't move. And in this particular installation, we're going to do a push-pull on the radiator, meaning we're going to push air towards the radiator, and then we're going to pull it from the other side to exhaust it out the back. So let's go ahead and get these fans mounted. And we want to be conscious of where our cables are. I want them to come out like that for an easier installation. So we've got the screws mounted. We're going to go ahead and tighten those up. So you'll notice the bracket is facing the outside of the case. That means the air is going to be exhausting this way. We'll be getting all the heat out of the motherboard. Okay, and there we go. We've got our CPU radiator fan assembly mounted. And next we want to mount the water block onto the CPU itself. And there's an easy way to tell if you get it the right way. I like the Corsair name to be showing properly. I don't think that's actually the spec, but that's the way I like to do it. These hoses are fairly malleable. It'll be a tight fit at first, but you should be able to get that water block on there fairly easily. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and remove the protective cover off of the water block that's protecting the thermal paste. And I'm going to go ahead and mount that on the motherboard, and then I've got these screws here that will mount onto the standoffs on the back plate that we installed earlier. So let's go ahead and get this put on. Okay, so I got the screws in there now. Let's go ahead and tighten them down. We're going to go corner to corner on them. And there we go. Water block's installed. So the fans are controlled by the software. Well, you can do it one of two ways. You can have the motherboard control the fans, or you can have the water block software control the fans, and I like to have the water block software control the fans. It has a quiet feature that I really like. So we're going to take the two 120 millimeter fans and plug those directly into these connectors, and these are PWM fans. They have four pinholes. Okay. And then on the top of the motherboard, where the headers are, there's a spot for CPU fan, CPU optional, and AIO pump. An AOI pump is where we're going to plug in this connector. AOI stands for all-in-one. And there we go. The water pump CPU cooler is now installed. Okay, so now that the water block is installed, I'm going to go ahead and install the data cables for the hard drive and the DVD drive. And the hard drive is right back here. Here's one SATA connector. We're going to come back out right there. And now we've got the other SATA connector for the DVD-ROM drive, and I'm going to use the one that's angled down to install that one. I think I'm going to tie that cable off back here if I can. No, I think I'm going to leave that. Okay, and let's go ahead and install this one for the other drive. So we're going to populate 2 SATA ports right off the bat. I'm going to tie these cables off just to give them a little strength. And then I'll deal with this when we do the cable management part of this install. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the power cabling. Corsair provides this convenient bag for all your cables. Fully modular power supply. It's the only kind I buy now. In the old days, you'd have all these cables, this big mess of cables coming out of the power supply, and you didn't use half of them. I'm glad to see that they've fixed that. Okay, so the first cable I'm going to install is the 24-pin motherboard power supply. It's the biggest one. So I'm going to put that out this grommet here. And we're going to plug this into the power supply down here. Now we're going to come around the back. I'm going to tie this down for the moment. Keep that to itself. Okay, and then we're going to come back out right here because that's where it'll end up on the motherboard. Right there. And every motherboard that I've ever worked on had a notched power that always faced out, and in this case it's the same as well. So we'd install this like this. Okay, now we're going to put in the CPU power, which I wish I had put in the water block because I've kind of hidden the connector, but we should be able to get it put in okay. And you're going to see writing on both sides that says CPU. This says Type 4. Type 4 goes to the power supply. Okay, so I got that cable put in. I did have to remove this. Just took out a few screws and remounted the fan. So now we need to mount the power supply for the DVD-ROM drive. I'm going to see if I can finagle this and use the same cable to get that hard drive as well. I may end up moving that to accommodate, but that'll work out just fine. Again, labeled Type 4. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and install the power cable for the 200mm fan. And there's the power for the 200mm case fan. And I'm going to run this over to here because I have more depth this way to hide the cables. So, too often build videos don't show this step, which I think is a mistake. I think a lot of people could learn from a proper cabling of a computer. It's so much more pleasing to have a proper installation of the cables, in my opinion. I think it shows the care of the system builder, in addition to the aesthetics. If anybody ever looks at this computer, my customer will be asked, wow, who did that? and you can drum up more business because of little things like this. And I think I'll tie down that motherboard power cable as well, because I don't think there's anything tying it down at the moment. I may, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and put a tie there as well for that one. Let's go ahead and do that. And I believe we are complete for power cabling. Now let's go ahead and take care of the front cable connectors, which are sitting right here. I always save those for last because they tend to be the smaller cables, and I don't like them to get beat up. So here's our USB 3.0, which is notched. The notch is on the bottom there, so I'm going to plug it in this way. Okay. And here is our HD audio for the front motherboard, front case connector. Okay. There we go. Okay, and now we just have our power switch, hard drive LED reset. And Asus supplies this nifty little adapter so you can plug all of these in before getting them onto the motherboard, which is handy. I noticed all motherboard manufacturers are doing this now. Okay, and so I've also got a speaker so we can hear the post beep, and that goes right here. And that just kind of dangles there, but I'm going to put a zip tie on it to hold it in place so it doesn't fall off. Although I'm not shipping this computer. And I think we're ready for power up. So this is the initial boot up, which is a good sign. I posted. Post is a power on self-test. Looks like all of our memory is reporting 32 gigabytes. We've got the correct CPU, the i7 7700k at stock 4.2 gigahertz. And it's currently configured for 4200 megahertz, and we're going to change that, obviously. Looks like our Western Digital hard drive is reporting, and our SATA drive, DVD drive, is reporting. So I think this is the first time I've ever had a post that did not go wrong. This is a first time post that worked with no problems at all. Of course, the motherboard is reporting that it's got a new CPU. That's pretty standard. It detected the M.2 drive. There should be something about the CPU fan. Ensure that the CPU fan is properly installed. The reason that's coming up is because we're using a water block and we don't have a fan on the CPU header. So we're going to go into the BIOS and disable CPU fan monitoring. So we're going to go ahead and hit F1. So we're in the BIOS. This is the UEFI BIOS. We're going to go to the monitor screen. And right here under CPU fan, we're going to ignore any warnings from there. And let's go back to the main. I want to look at easy mode. Yeah, this is what I'm looking for. So this is where everything is reporting. We are getting a 26 degrees Celsius motherboard temperature and a 28 degree centigrade CPU temperature, which is outstanding. I was expecting between 30 and 32. So we are running very cool right now. I do notice that the BIOS version is 0.0222, which is a little bit out of date. We're going to update the BIOS for sure. Looks like all my RAM slots are reporting at 2133 megahertz. So we're going to go in there and change the XMP, which is right here, and we're going to enable that for profile 1. Looks like we've got the AIO pump reporting. That's the Corsair water pump. That's reporting. Looks like our M.2 drive is set to boot. So we're going to go ahead and save